As a mother of two small boys, I think we may have to find a securer way of helping our children.
For decades, speculation surrounded a lost letter from Princess Diana to Princess Anne, one that could reveal hidden truths about her final years and the monarchy's future. Now, after 26 years, the letter has finally been uncovered, raising more questions than answers. Why did Diana reach out to Anne despite their distant relationship? Was it a plea for understanding, a warning, or a message the royal family wanted buried forever? What if everything we believe to be true about Princess Diana could be changed by a single letter? A missing letter to Princess Anne, which might have secrets about Diana's hardships and the future of the monarchy, was the subject of decades of gossip. The letter has now come to light after 26 years. Diana was never close to Anne, so why did she write to her? Was it something the royal family didn't want us to see, a warning or a plea? And what had Diana said that had been so long suppressed? Diana was well known for her intense private letters, frequently filled with unfiltered passion and confessions she was unable to express publicly. Her handwritten notes to confidants and friends had given the world glimpses of her most vulnerable moments. However, this letter was not like the others. People began to wonder about the real nature of their relationship when she sought out Princess Anne of all people. Was it an effort to make amends, a request for comprehension, or something far more startling? Even after the letter's discovery, the royal family stayed silent and refused to recognize its existence. However, their lack of response further stoked rumors. Why had it been hidden for so long if the contents were innocent? Some believed the letter contained secrets about Diana's last years, undisclosed realities about her hardships, the oppressive character of royal life, and possibly even a prophecy about what lay ahead. Others thought it reflected the tense relationship between two women who had never really known each other, something far more personal. One must travel back decades to a period when Diana and Anne were just two women separated by duty but bound by everything else in order to fully comprehend the significance of this letter. From the beginning, their relationship was complex. Diana's warmth and charm had captured the public's attention, but Anne was adamant that duty came before feelings. She did not tolerate theatrics or what she considered needless public spectacles. She believed Diana was too eager to please and too preoccupied with the praise she received. Their initial interactions had not been cordial. Diana had tried her hardest to get close to her future sister-in-law in the months before her marriage to Prince Charles in 1991. She wanted to leave a positive impression and demonstrate her respect for the strict customs of the royal family. Anne, however, didn't care. She didn't want to entertain what she saw as Diana's attempts to win people over with her charms, having witnessed too many newcomers try to fit in with what they believed a royal should be. One particular instance stood out. Diana's wedding was only a few weeks away in late June. In an attempt to bridge the gap already growing between them, she sought out Anne in hopes of sharing a moment of connection. She used the formal phrase customary in royal circles to greet Anne with respect. However, Anne hardly paid attention and barely raised her head from her work. Diana remembered the coldness of that moment, and their distant relationship remained evident going forward. Anne had no desire to be her friend. But why? What was the reason for Anne's resistance to Diana? Many thought it was simply personality differences. Anne had a reputation for living a straightforward life. She worked tirelessly behind the scenes, carrying out her royal responsibilities without looking for recognition. Yet, despite her dedication, she had never been the subject of such intense media attention as Diana. She felt it was unfair. Diana's every action was watched and praised, while Anne toiled with little acknowledgement. Over time, resentment grew stronger. By the early 1980s, Anne was regarded as one of the most diligent royals, performing hundreds of engagements and dedicating herself to duty. Then Diana arrived. Everything changed. Diana's natural ability to engage the public, her sincere curiosity about people's lives, and her undeniable charm captivated the world. Anne's work faded into the background. Diana became everything the public wanted, while Anne remained overlooked. Another small but significant rift contributed to Anne's coldness toward Diana. many believed and would be Prince William's godmother when he was born in 1992. After all, Charles had been the godfather of Anne's son, Peter. Naturally, the favor was expected to be repaid. Diana, however, thought otherwise. Instead of choosing Anne, she selected someone outside the immediate royal family, someone closer to her. And noticed the snub. Already feeling overshadowed by Diana, she was now publicly rejected for a role she had assumed would be hers. But it didn't end there. At the very least, Anne expected to be considered when Prince Harry was born in 1984. Once again, Diana chose someone else. This time, Anne took it personally. Her response was telling. On the day of Prince Harry's christening, while the rest of the royal family gathered at Windsor Castle, Anne was absent. Her official excuse? A prior engagement. But many believed it was an intentional statement. Anne stayed at her Gloucestershire home and hosted a hunting party instead. The rejection was silent but unmistakable. The message was clear: if she wasn't important enough to be included, then she had no reason to be there. Despite these conflicts, Diana never publicly mentioned Anne. She never spoke about their lack of closeness or the coldness that defined their relationship. However, it was there. And now, with the discovery of this letter, new questions arose. Had Diana made one last attempt to reach out? Had she tried to heal the rift between them? The most pressing question of all, why had Anne never acknowledged it? If she had received the letter, why hadn't she said anything? Had she dismissed it just as she had dismissed Diana all those years before? Or was the truth far more complicated? Everything people believed about Diana and Anne's relationship could change because of one letter. But to understand its significance, one had to go back even further, to the years when Diana's life was unraveling, when she was more isolated than ever, and when writing became her only escape. If Diana had truly written to Anne, it was possible she was seeking understanding, something she had never found before. She had always known that the royal palace was governed by customs and unwritten rules that dictated relationships, conduct, and even emotions. For years, she had tried to navigate these expectations, but by the early 1990s, the illusion had begun to shatter. The fairy tale vision of her marriage to Prince Charles had long since disappeared. She was alone. Her position in the royal family declined alongside her marriage. By 1992, the whispers of scandal were deafening. Every tense public appearance between Diana and Charles was analyzed by the media, but behind closed doors, it was far worse. Diana felt trapped in a life where she had lost her sense of self. She had no allies within the royal household. Her marriage was in ruins, and her mental health was deteriorating. She had tried to seek help from those around her but was met with cold indifference. The royal family had always maintained emotional restraint, but Diana felt their distance was deliberate. She confided in friends that she was seen as an inconvenience, a disruption to the monarchy's carefully maintained order. As her marriage crumbled, her relationships with the rest of the royal family worsened. There was a time when she thought someone like Anne might understand her struggles despite their differences. She was wrong. Anne had always embodied traditional royal duty. She wore the crown without complaint, while Diana struggled under its weight. And had no patience for public confessions or emotional outbursts. To her, Diana's media appearances, personal interviews, and candid discussions about her struggles were a betrayal of everything the monarchy stood for. But for Diana, speaking out was the only option she had left. The situation reached a breaking point in the 1990s. In December 1992, British Prime Minister John Major made a shocking announcement: Charles and Diana were formally separating. The news sent shockwaves through the country. And now, 26 years later, the discovery of this letter raises one final question: was Diana trying to tell Anne something that no one else would listen to? Entire globe, it was not shocking inside the palace. For years, the family had anticipated this. They had no idea how Diana would choose to present her version of events. Diana sat down for an intense interview with the BBC's Panorama in 1995, a choice that would alter the path of royal history. It was one of the most pivotal moments of her life. She discussed her failing marriage, her battles with bulimia, and, at a moment that would go down in history, Charles's affair with Camilla Parker Bowles. With serene assurance, she stated, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." The interview was an outright insult to all that the monarchy stood for. It was emotional and unfiltered. Additionally, it was the final rift in her ties with the royal family. She became an outsider after that, no longer merely the future king's estranged wife. According to reports, and was incensed, just like the rest of the royal family. She believed that Diana's interview was a needless public humiliation that undermined the monarchy's credibility. More significantly, though, it confirmed Anne's opinion that Diana was never cut out for life in the royal family. Diana had nevertheless written to Anne in spite of their disagreements. The fact that the letter had been kept secret for decades demonstrated Diana's desire to convey a significant message. However, why to a lady who had always avoided her? What could she possibly have said? Diana's life changed course in the months following the Panorama interview. No longer was she subject to the same royal duties. She went above and beyond what was customarily expected of a royal in her charitable endeavors. She became known as the People's Princess as a result of her humanitarian activities, her work in nations plagued by landmines, her trips to AIDS clinics, and her efforts with leprosy sufferers. By stepping out of the royal shadow and into a light she had created for herself, she was rewriting her legacy. However, she was also growing more susceptible. She was more vulnerable than ever to the media and those who wanted to dominate her story since she lacked the royal family's protection. The last chapter of Diana's life would occur in the year 1997. She also appeared to feel that time was running short. In the months before her untimely death, she sent more letters than ever before, to friends, co-workers, and confidants she could trust. Every one of them carried a sense of urgency, suggesting something more profound, something she feared might happen. She complained about being watched in one letter. In another, she spoke of the difficulties she was under and her dread of being silenced. Although she was aware of the dangers of speaking up, she had never been one to keep quiet. What would she have said in a letter to Anne, then? Diana probably didn't think Anne would be friendly in return. If anything, she might have written to express something that no one else in the family was willing to hear rather than to try to patch up their relationship. Maybe she wanted Anne to know what she had experienced. Maybe she hoped Anne would eventually see that Diana wasn't the villain the family had portrayed her as. However, Anne never mentioned the letter. For years, no one was aware that it had even been written. She never acknowledged its existence. Its existence was not made public until 2024, when a private collection of Diana's letters went up for auction. An envelope that had been unopened for decades contained a solitary note addressed to Anne. It contained the information Diana had always wished to be heard by a member of the royal family. Diana had been a writer all her life. Long before she was the most photographed woman in the world and her life was being scrutinized by every tabloid, she found comfort in writing down her thoughts. Writing letters allowed her to process feelings she was unable to voice aloud and to speak her mind when no one seemed to want to hear it. However, the tone of her letters changed as the months of 1997 went by. They conveyed a sense of urgency and subdued despair, as though she was aware that time was running out. That summer, Diana found herself in a difficult situation. She was released from the restrictions of royal service but also lost the protection that accompanied it. When her divorce from Charles was finalized in August 1996, she was no longer formally known as Her Royal Highness. She had lost her royal title and was now just Diana, Princess of Wales. Although it was a minor element, it was significant. She was more exposed than ever without the royal institution's protection. Her life had taken a dramatic turn. She spent a lot of time outside of Britain and had begun dating Dodi Fayed, the son of millionaire Mohammed Al Fayed. From her charitable missions to war-torn areas to her yacht excursions in the Mediterranean, the media relentlessly followed her every step of the way. However, those closest to her felt something different. Even if the outside world saw a woman welcoming a new chapter, she couldn't sleep comfortably. She was also afraid that something was about to occur. Diana had told friends that she felt like she was being watched, and watched she was. She wrote to her former butler, Paul Burrell, in October 1996, stating that she thought there was a plot to get rid of her. She described evil powers operating in the background and a growing paranoia she was unable to shake. Diana's letter to him contained more than just an effort at reconciliation. If this was her state of mind at the time, most likely, it was a warning. She thought and needed to hear this message, for reasons she alone knew. However, why N? N was not a close friend or ally. She had never been an advocate for Diana. If anything, she had been critical, aloof, and often downright contemptuous of the world's favorite lady. Diana had a friendship with Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York. It would have been much more logical for her to write to her. Yet, she had chosen Anne. Maybe Diana recognized a quality in Anne that others did not. Despite their disagreements, Anne had long been regarded as the most self-reliant royal, living by her own rules and defying convention. She was known to be direct, practical, and unreservedly honest. Perhaps Diana thought Anne was the only member of the family who could handle the truth and relate to what she had gone through. Although the exact date of Diana's letter writing is unknown, experts who have studied her final months believe it was written sometime between May and July of 1997. This was a pivotal time in her life. She was making headlines for venturing into politically delicate areas, stepping up her humanitarian efforts, and continuing her crusade against landmines. When she visited Angola in early 1997 with the Halo Trust, a group devoted to clearing landmines, it was one of her most significant acts. One of her most famous photographs was taken there, as she walked through an active minefield. She demonstrated that she was more than just a royal figurehead, she was a force for change. However, this act of defiance against political leaders who had ignored the issue also made her a target. Diana became more outspoken about her concerns in the months that followed. Several influential people did not like her involvement in foreign matters. Could this letter have contained information about something she had uncovered? If it was meant to alert Anne, it could have been something she believed the family should be worried about. Or perhaps the letter was more personal. In her final months, Diana may have just been hoping that someone in the royal family would recognize her for the woman she truly was, not the people's princess, not a media spectacle. She was a mother who adored her two sons. A woman who had tried to make her marriage work but failed. A woman who had battled personal struggles only to be met with icy indifference from those who were supposed to support her. No matter what Diana wrote, it remained unread for over 26 years. And never mentioned it. The palace never acknowledged its existence. The letter appeared to have been sealed away, never to be seen again. Nevertheless, that changed in 2024. Royal historians and collectors took notice when a private collection of Diana's letters was offered for sale in Essex. Most of the letters were the kind the world had already seen, thank you notes to staff and communications with close friends. However, one stood out. Princess Anne was the recipient of a single, sealed envelope. For decades, it had remained unopened, and the reason soon became clear. When its contents were finally made public, those who had spent years researching Diana's life were stunned. When the letter was eventually opened in 2024, nobody had anticipated what was inside. It was not an attempt to reveal the monarchy's secrets. It was not a last-ditch plea for help. It was something far more unsettling. Diana had written not just about her personal struggles, but about the future. Only a few months before her untimely death in Paris, the letter was dated early in the year. The words written in her characteristic cursive were as genuine and profoundly felt as those found in all of her correspondence. The tone, however, was striking. Diana wasn't writing out of regret or sadness. She seemed to be aware of what was about to happen because she was writing deliberately. She talked about the difficulties she had faced and how she had attempted to work her way through a system that did not have room for someone like her. She talked about how she had been silenced when she attempted to speak her truth and how she had been cast out for not fitting in. More than anything else, though, she wrote about the monarchy's future and how Anne, of all people, would eventually influence it. Nothing Diana said was resentful, no rage. Rather, there was a startling clarity, as though she had already come to terms with her fate. She voiced her worries about the organization that had embraced her at one point but abandoned her when she most needed it. In addition, she made a prognosis that today seems uncannily correct. She thought the current form of the monarchy would not last, that the customs that had guided the royal family for centuries were fading, and that the next generation would not tolerate them. She talked about William and Harry and expressed her concern that the strict standards set for them would cause them to completely leave the institution. The letter's most surprising element was when she addressed Anne personally, speaking to her as someone she had grown to view differently rather than as a sister-in-law. Diana said that they had never really understood each other and that they were different. However, she also noted that she respected Anne's strength and her capacity to perform royal duties without looking for approval or recognition. She acknowledged that, in many respects, Anne was everything she had attempted and failed to be: self-reliant, unfazed, and unconcerned with how other people saw her. The question that persisted long after the letter was read, however, came next: when I am no longer able to protect them, would you? It was a terrifying request, implying that Diana had already accepted the idea that she would not live to witness her son's adulthood. She was requesting that Anne, who had never been affectionate toward her and had never publicly backed her, take care of William and Harry while she was away. And why? Why not the Queen or even Charles? Diana might have thought that Anne, in spite of her icy demeanor, was the only one who could provide her sons with what she herself was never able to: direction without intervention, support without spectacle. And has never been one to play into public narratives or control the press. She had led a modest life, carrying out her responsibilities without seeking praise. Perhaps Diana had thought that Anne would be the only one who could guide William and Harry through a life she had considered intolerable. In the years to come, everything changed. When this letter was discovered, it made people reevaluate Anne's position within the royal family and wonder if she had ever heeded Diana's advice in private after Diana's passing. Had she ever been in touch with William or Harry? Had she ever tried to be the person Diana had imagined her to be? The palace's decision to remain silent about the letter's veracity only served to feed rumors. However, others who had examined Diana's handwriting, communication style, and frequent use of letters to express herself thought it was authentic. It was not the shocking disclosure that many had anticipated. It didn't reveal betrayal, conspiracies, or affairs. Rather, it was something much more human: a mother's last-ditch effort to make sure her kids wouldn't be left alone, even if she wasn't there. Had Anne, however, paid attention? And continued to be as quiet as ever in the years after Diana's passing. She never interacted with the media the way others did, and she seldom ever discussed family issues. However, several people started to detect minor changes when they looked back. Although Anne had never been close to William and Harry when they were little, it has been said that she worked behind the scenes to give them the autonomy to direct their own lives. And was the one who had pushed for reforms that would give younger royals greater freedom and a more modernized monarchy. Additionally, Anne was one of the few family members who did not publicly criticize Prince Harry and Meghan Markle when they declared their intention to leave their royal duties in the year 2020. Was it because she recalled what Diana had said? In addition to raising a lot of questions, the letter's appearance in 2004 gave closure. Diana's narrative had been recounted for years from a tragic, lost potential, and what might have been perspective. This letter, however, was unique. It wasn't a tale of remorse or hopelessness. It was a last act of optimism. Even though Diana knew she was losing the fight for herself, she never gave up on her sons. Her words had reappeared decades later, serving as a reminder of the freedom she had always desired for them. However, the question still stood: had Anne really done what Diana had asked of her all those years ago? Or had it been disregarded, as Diana had been for a large portion of her life? The royal family had desired its secrecy. Old arguments concerning the royal family, its customs, and the cost of duty were rekindled when Diana's letter was made public. The monarchy had long taken pride in its capacity to adapt to changing times and uphold the traditions that had guided it for generations. Diana, however, had witnessed what others would not recognize. She had seen that the world was changing, that the naive awe of royal customs was waning, and that the monarchy would inevitably fall apart due to its own inflexibility if it did not change. Her words to Anne were a silent warning about what lay ahead, not merely a request for her sons. And now, 26 years after her passing, the warning seemed more pertinent than before. The royal family continued as if nothing had changed in the years after Diana's death. They lamented her in public, but the institution was still as cautious and private, bound by duty and expectation. William and Harry were raised inside the same inflexible frameworks that had previously choked their mother. But no matter how hard the palace tried to keep things under control, Diana's influence could not be eliminated. Her impact permeated every aspect of the monarchy, influencing both her son's self-perception and how the world perceived the royal family. Both William and Harry started making decisions as adults that were more in line with their mother's principles than with the customs that were forced upon them. The future king, William, approached royal life in a contemporary manner, striking a balance between his responsibilities and his strong feeling of autonomy. He wed Catherine Middleton, a commoner, and the two of them brought up their kids in a way that felt very different from how previous royal successors had been brought up. Warmth, relatability, and a clear desire to provide their kids with the most typical existence possible were all evident. Diana had hoped that William would accept his job, but on his own terms. Harry, however, made a much more dramatic move. Citing the same difficulties Diana had encountered decades before, he and Meghan Markle made the startling decision to completely leave royal life in the year 2021. History was being repeated. With the constant media intrusion, the lack of security, and the sense of loneliness, it was evident that Diana's concerns were valid. When the pair opened up about their experiences in interviews, the organization remained unchanged. No one had learned. And the younger generation had started to rebel, exactly as she had anticipated. For her part, Anne continued to be silent, unwavering, and committed to her duty, as she always had been. She never addressed Diana's letter in public and never mentioned whether it had affected her in any way. However, there were minor, hardly perceptible changes in the years following Diana's passing. Long a supporter of a more condensed monarchy, and maintained that not all royals had to shoulder the burden of official responsibilities. She supported efficiency, pragmatism, and letting certain family members live their individual lives. Whether deliberate or not, this way of thinking reflected the life Diana had envisioned for her sons, one in which they were free to follow their own path. Diana's remarks are still relevant as the monarchy finds itself at a turning point. The letter's message was ageless, even if it had been hidden for decades. The world is less inclined to accept royal customs without challenge these days. Demands for accountability and modernization are replacing the notion of unquestioning allegiance to the crown. The question that the royal family can no longer avoid is whether they will be left behind or if they can actually progress. Diana anticipated this long before anybody else did. She realized that the monarchy's future would depend on accepting change rather than holding on to the past. It remains to be seen if the institution will eventually take her warning seriously.